I'm not quite sure whether I can say anything more clever about that.
Just my last question.
Okay.
You talked about the long-term kind of implications of fracking, and once they find gas, the kind of infrastructure layout. Have you considered it?
Let's take somebody else with a red pen in front of you.
Yeah, just a sort of question, I think, kind of related to the question about the police, because I suppose it's about, I'm sort of asking about whether there's an element of sort of like NIMBYism and the kind of, like, not in my backyard sort of attitude to fracking, in people being angry about fracking. But then do you see that the experience, particularly police brutality, and I suppose particularly socialists getting involved with the campaign, opens up the space to sort of talk about wider politics and like what, like, I don't know, could you say something about that and things?
Right, go on, yeah.
I'm not quite sure how to approach that.
I suppose is it that you see people getting radicalised through taking part in action?
Yes, I'm sure that's the case. I mean, I don't see how they could fail to be radicalised. I don't think it is very much the not in my backyard, because when you talk about especially when you talk about climate change, you know, and the fact that it's a fossil fuel, the fact that it is actually, it's over a period of 20 years, I believe methane is 86 to 100 times more powerful as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. And of course then that affects the entire planet. It isn't just a matter of the nearest houses, although they have to possibly suffer the brunt of the thing. I think the other thing that happens is that people get radicalised into self-activity and self-organisation. Once we'd started and had our first meeting and sort of explained what it was all about, quite a number of the locals started doing things on their own back and their own initiative, and sort of that kind of raised the participation within the housing estate of people doing things, and I think that's all, you know, that's part of radicalisation, isn't it?
A question at the back about what happens if they find gas, what happens? You know, I mean, are you in a position to answer that?
Who just thought about the long-term prospects?
Well, the long-term prospects is that they will start actually fracking. Each well can only be fracked a certain fairly small number of times. Then they will abandon it and go a couple of miles down the road and drill again. And I mean, you saw some of the photographs from Australia of an aerial shot with perhaps 20 fracking sites within the scope of the shot. So that I think it's something which, you know, which will keep on happening unless we stop it. The wholesale industrialisation of the British countryside is not an exaggeration as a prospect.
Yeah, it's not something that I could say that we've made a regular thing about saying, you know, new pipelines will be built and how much land's that going to involve being dug up and where that's going to go and whatever. However, I mean, nobody's mentioned today, we've not mentioned radioactivity either, you know, but that's another big issue, you know, releasing radon gas and other radioactive materials from underground, and spillages on roads that might happen because of vehicles being involved in accidents, and how many more road deaths there might be by people being run down by one of these big trucks, of which there's going to be one every 5 minutes, coming, you know, delivering water and smashing up the local roads and polluting the atmosphere with diesel. In future I'll make sure that I remember to take that one up, because you're right, it's about the whole-scale industrialisation of an area. It could be, people I think though in terms of posing it are more concerned about earthquakes, about whether the house is going to fall into a sinkhole or something like that. And at the moment, really NIMBYism, the proximity of it does energise a lot of people. And actually it's something we didn't get, you know, I want to try to convince people in London that, you know, it's not only is it not, you know, not in my country or on my planet should be positioned, right? and like it's them lot in North can sort that out, right? Because we want some solidarity, North-South solidarity there, right? So people in the South doing some work on this issue. What was the other point was about, the second point?
So what was your question at the front there? Sorry.
Yours?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess about people being radicalised.
Getting out.
Yeah. You see, you've got to bear in mind that there are really mixed bag of people involved in the anti-fracking movement. Originally, it was just people like Fracking who were like basically environmentalists. Some of whom, you know, they think, what we need to do is basically turn all electric off and just put pullovers on and stuff. And, you know, they don't think like 1 million climate jobs is, it's like all that carbon you got to use making them wind turbines and things like that. You got them who were involved, our local residents who never heard of what fracking was and just turned up, and then a few people like ourselves. In this raw research stage, Barton Moss, they've had BNP. BNP are against fracking. They've been going down to places like Barton Moss in Peak. In fact, some people have been greeting them. And I'm thinking, well, I wouldn't have greeted them, I told them where to go. You've also got this organiser, we've had BNP. Tricky Kern said he was glad to welcome them to Barton Moss site. We've had a group in Liverpool, Albion Rising, who are basically something like Golden Dawn in. Hey, they've offered to take them. They've offered to take them to Liverpool, teach them how to produce their own newsletters, how to speak in public. You know, they've even gone there with batteries to say, we'll power one of your cabins with electricity. Financially supported them. We've also got people who are conspiracy theorists. We've got one guy, I'll might get back to him. A lot like me if it does. Ian R. Crane, who believes in, some 3,000 years ago, some space people came and bred into with some elements, they created this Illuminati, and climate change is just a conspiracy. It's just about getting us paying more green taxes. And how comes if climate change happened in it's cold in the morning, and global climate's not, temperature's not gone up for the last 9 years. And he's actually, in my view, building a personal cult following along the lines of David Icke. He has his own programme called the Crane Report. And then you've got people who call themselves anarchists, who other anarchists would say we're giving them a bad name. They don't know what they are, so they call themselves anarchists. And they say we don't want leaders and we don't want any leadership. And then basically what you end up with this tyranny of structuralistness, where all these people, they say we don't want leaders, and you think, well, what are all you lot doing when you're making all these decisions? Things like we shouldn't be doing things in secret, and yet I get invited to a secret meeting in Blackpool. And I'm thinking, well, hang on, I thought we weren't into leaders, so what we all doing here, like at this meeting? You've got people who are just ordinary residents who go along who just think it's a bad idea. So it's a very diverse. What we need to get more people involved is ordinary people who, are just on simple things. It's bad for the environment, it's going to knacker up, your houses, pollute the air, pollute the water. We don't need it anywhere. We could put 1 million third unemployed back to work doing all this more sensible stuff, because, as I said, it's a finite resource anyway. 30, 40 years' time, even if it were benign in terms of environment, it's going to gone. So in 30, 40 years' time, you think, well, how are we going to do? We'll be faced with the same questions, so why not do it now?
I don't think that you ought to give people the impression that they are all slightly off their rocker.
No. You said they're a mixed bunch.
There are some ordinary people there.
Mixed bunch.
Jane and then...
It's just, I'm really worried about people like BNP and Albion Rising. If we could turn them and make them see the errors of their way, fine. But you see, there's always been a danger in the environmental movement, actually since the 30s, that Nazis especially tend to present themselves as like, lovers of the environment and lovers of the earth. And there's always this danger, the sort of blood and soil tendency within the environmental movement. So, in a way, I'm sort of glad that they're showing an interest, but need to be very, very careful about, you know, it is if you dine with the devil, you take a long spoon. Now, if one person comes to the BNP and as a result of getting involved with sort of socialist campaigners, they leave the BNP, then that's fine. I just think that, you know, we just need to be very careful about this, you know, this sort of right-wing tendency that there always is in environmental politics. That's why we have Green Left, actually. See, it's just a sort of a caution, really. Okay, that's all.
So somebody, oh yeah, well, I think the guy with Ben and you again, yeah.
People have been talking about alternative energy scenarios, and I haven't heard anyone mention a zero carbon Britain or two energy future, which are two interesting things to look into. But also, sorry, you said after these wells are finished, they'll still leak methane.
Yeah.
Now, I'd never considered, what's the status of the test sites in terms of leaking methane?
I'll just take a look.
Yeah.
It's partly some other comments. I think what was interesting about, so in Blackpool when there was the earthquakes related to fracking a few years ago, it then emerged that they hadn't done a geophysical survey and so didn't realise that they drilled directly onto a fault. And I think that sort of demonstrates, I think also you sort of see that a lot of the research that's being done, so I'm a geophysicist and like the sort of things that are doing the research now into sort of like how do you fracture rocks and things like that. And I think that sort of demonstrates to some extent that this is all just being done, like they're just doing it without actually knowing what they're doing a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's obviously like causing earthquakes and things like that is a big problem. I think also, I think it sort of shows, and I think even, I think it has a tools I mentioned to it. So for example, like I live in Cambridge, and I think sort of MPs out in the Fens sort of saying that they welcome fracking, but I don't think that there's anything that they can frack there. And I think the sort of them saying that they support fracking and support them doing it there, I think is a political thing. Sort of saying like that supporting this in a sort of abstract way is a way to make a point about sort of. It's not even coming from a sort of desire to do it. It's sort of putting a marker out there to sort of say that they support that. And I think that sort of shows how desperate they are to like get fracking sort of happening.
I just want to make a comment about the diversity of the movement, because you know these things are mass movements, right? You know, it encompasses all sorts of people from society. And I think the thing about Australia is that the countryside outside of my part of Australia, I know. I've been there a lot, but the countryside outside of some of the major cities is redneck country, really, actually. Redneck country. You know, very conservative. The Labour Party in Australia makes the Labour Party here in Britain look progressive. You know, northern New South Wales, there's lots of farmers. People who dropped out of cities as well who wanted to go to the green country. So, but it is very, very conservative. But you know, in the course of the struggle, there were, you know, it came out in the film that their eyes were open about how democracy between inverted commas works or doesn't work in the country, and therefore they get radicalised and see how those companies have got their contracts through corruption, through nepotism, through etc., and they're incensed. Suddenly they're incensed and they don't like how the system as it is now works. And it's you know, I think it's a way of radicalising and obviously they realise that you know they had to step outside the system through mass action. Through civil disobedience, through and getting a camp of 2,000 in rural rural Australia is quite an achievement because it's quite, you know, it's not a very densely populated area outside of some you know, outside the big cities and the Gold Coast. But so anyway, that's my point on that. So sorry, you wanted to come in?
Well, I was going to come in about these methane leaks. I think one needs to be clear that a lot of the stuff that we're quoting from the experience of fracking in the United States, whether it's a lot further on. In England, there's been only a few holes drilled. Even a smaller number have actually had fracking done. And so the leaking methane is going to be a bit high down the road. There was a claim at the beginning, the government was saying, that fracking was a good transition fuel because it was the transition between coal and oil and a completely clean energy future. However, that's been a very, very long bridge towards this future, which seems to be receding as fast as we approach it. So that there's no, you know, one would say, well, what future? Where is the progress towards clean energy? Because it's very much absent. So it was pointed out when the first comparison was made between fracked gas and something like coal, that what was missing out of this was the fact that methane does leak from around the wells where it's being disturbed, and that it's very difficult to measure. I've seen one graph where they compared methane concentrations upwind and downwind of a well, and the difference was spectacular. But it's very difficult to measure, and the estimates that have been done later with an attempt to bring in the leaking methane factor say the results of those are that fracked gas is at least as bad, if not worse, than burning coal because of the methane that escapes into the atmosphere. So it's not a problem that is facing Britain yet, but as soon as they start fracking and as soon as they start exhausting one well and moving on to the next one, the question of capping is absolutely critical. And as far as I know, from in 2012, there was a report by the Royal Society and the Royal Academy of Engineers which said you have to have a whole set of things you do and people you appoint in order to make sure that fracking is safe. And if you do all those things, fracking can be safe. And Cameron, of course, said, oh, fracking can be safe, thank you very much, and have ignored all the recommendations, of which there are a whole list, and I can show you if you come up later, none of which have been put into place. But the conclusion of those scientists has been sort of jumped on and trumpeted. So their support is invalid because none of the recommendations have been followed.
I'll just get Steve to have the last word now, because some people finish their workshops want to come in.
Well, I agree on the last point about transition fuel. It's a transition fuel. But we had Shamina, I forget her second name, at the event we mentioned before from the Tyndall Centre, and Research for America. They said that there's a good case to be had that if fracking is a good transition fuel, so is opening coal-fired power stations would be probably just as as benign on CO2 emissions, such as how good of a transition fuel it is. But we have a problem with like leaking methane as an issue. Two things in Lee were next town to where I live, where there was an old refuse, landfill site that's been filled over. It was leaking gas, and now it's got a big flame coming out of it because they're burning the excess gas that's coming off. They're burning it, and there's a site in Lee at the old Bickershaw Colliery, which was the deepest mine in Northern Hemisphere, where it's called coal mine methane, and they're saying, well, we're not drilling for it, we're just trying to avoid it escaping into atmosphere. And there's a case to be had. We should be supporting that type of thing, because it'd be better to capture it and use it in the gas that's being produced rather than being released into the atmosphere. The other thing, the last thing about the diversity movement. I mean, when I said there's a diverse bunch, I give you some examples of diversity. I mean, there's obviously a lot of people involved from Green Party. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of leftists and environmentalists, and in some respect, we, as I would say, the more sensible elements in it. And the rest will be heroic people, don't get me wrong, there's some very committed people I wouldn't want to not, what they do, camping out over winter period at Barton Moss, you know, I've said, you know, wouldn't have got me doing it. But we need to inject a bit more of the, you know, political things that need to be done, because the police issue for a start, is, you know, can only be done politically. This bill going through Parliament, which will be a big blow, you know, they're not going to stop that bill going through Parliament at Crawley, whatever it's called, you know, Barton Moss protest camp. They're not going to have any impact on it. And unfortunately, in some respect, there's like a schism open between people on the camps who think, you know, this is the front line, we're like the stormtroopers, and you know, unless you're supporting us here, you're not actually engaged in the struggle. But really, it's a combination of all these things, and a political offensive is what we need. We need to be working together, people on the left, and the Green Party, Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth, whoever's prepared to do it. We need to be working together in the next period to make a massive political campaign to stop this bill, and because it's going to be top of, you know, high up on political agenda, this, and we need to, you know, use that fact, and it will benefit the entire movement and the left and the Green movement as well, in my views.
Right, thank you very much. Here's a list of camps, right? And thank you very much for Eva and Steve for coming along. So the final plenary is in this room here in 10 minutes' time, something like that. Roderick, you want to say something?
Do we some of these?
That's all right, you're left.
The Ecosocialism, on back
Very good.
So we got to it.
I'm going to call it a day. I'll see you tomorrow. You haven't got any paper plates, have you?
No.
No, I didn't think so. I better buy some.
I've got a few cups, but no paper plates.
No, this is, I've made some food. It remains as not very many people there.
I don't think so. I think, you know, half a dozen tops.
Yeah, but
You know, I know of,
yeah, well, I better go buy.
I know about 4 people who said they're coming.
I better go and buy some paper plates on the way home. So we have. I've got something for us to eat. We need something for us